So it has a brew, this time in a pathetic little e-bio mug, mainly because I didn't really fancy a massive cup of tea, really. I didn't really want to have an overabundance amount of tea, so I decided to go for a little shitty mug. I also have leftover pizza because, why not, YOLO? Domino's Pizza Mighty Meaty with the hot dog stuffed crust, the best thing probably ever. But anyway, I went camping at the weekend, which is kind of why I'm not very organised. I'm tired as fuck. And also half the reason why I went, why I got pizza. Anyway, for the third week in a row, Xbox One news again. So, Microsoft did a Tory government esque thing of doing a complete U-turn on what they said at E3 and what they have been saying before in terms of used games, in terms of DRM, in terms of having to have your console on all the time, and if you don't check in every 24 hours, it will kick you out, that sort of stuff. And they've kind of dropped that all now. They're not going to region lock things. They've taken off the fact so you don't have to connect to the internet every 24 hours. They didn't. I think it's still going to be down to the publishers. They kind of were still a little bit vague as to what. I don't think they've stripped it out. I think you can still have the ability to, if publishers really want to. So if EA, for instance, come along and say, we want FIFA 14 to have you always to be connected to the internet because it's social or other bullshit, then it probably can have that feature in there. But Microsoft are pretty much saying, well, we're not gonna enforce it. We're not going to get you to do that. Use game stuff as well. They're ditching all that shit. So basically, you can use games. I think pretty much this is what Microsoft had to do. Now, a lot of people were saying that, and to be fair, I was quite surprised that actually Microsoft even did this, because it basically admits defeat, doesn't it? And you don't, even if your idea is a shit idea, unless it's completely utterly shit, you generally don't go back on it because that's like a first admission of guilt, and it just says, okay, we were wrong, and therefore it doesn't look very good to your shareholders. You lose loads of money, so it's, I'm quite surprised they did it, but they needed to. I think it's good for the community. Does it mean that I go out and buy one? No, definitely not. Because A, I wouldn't have a use for one, and B, this doesn't necessarily mean that Microsoft won't fuck up again. I mean, it's a game changer. I mean, a lot of people on Twitter were saying, oh, this, that, and the other, and I was like, well, a lot of people still don't think they still think that Microsoft is a horrible, nasty company, and I think to a certain extent parts of it are. Xbox, for instance, I have a sneaky suspicion that Don Matrick, perhaps, which I actually pronounced wrong last time around, it's not Don Matic, it's Don Matrick. I have a sneaky suspicion he may be told to leave, because if it was his decision to do that and it lost Microsoft share prices, or lost Microsoft's money, then I suspect he may get fired. But it's interesting that the Dow was down. I'm going to talk about shares and stocks for a minute, because pretty much the day, or around about the day that Apple came out with their iOS 7 and Xbox One came out, and a few other bits from companies came out, all their stocks went down. And I did a bit of research on this, and it turns out that the Dow Jones went down at exactly the same time. So this doesn't necessarily mean that it's shareholders panicking because iOS 7's coming out or because the Xbox One's coming out. It's because the entire market's a fuck at the moment, because the US Treasury released some big bit of news. And if you know anything about stocks and shares, I don't really need to tell you about what happened with that. So yeah, Xbox One pretty much they reversed their thing. I'll put a link in the description below of what you can see from that. It's a little bit, it's just standard press release sort of stuff like, oh well, thanks for your cooperation and all that bollocks. In other news, of course, Instagram released their Vine equivalent, or sort of kind of ish. I don't really know why they insist on doing it. I mean, Vine is a good idea. And then Instagram putting it in, I don't know necessarily that's such a good idea, but Facebook own it now, so kind of, I suppose, maybe they want to embed it all into Facebook, I don't know, but that's kind of an interesting thing. And then obviously we've got the privacy things to do with PRISM and all these other stuff, which I was going to talk about the other week, but I didn't, because A, I was insanely mad not at the US government, but the lack of knowledge by the general populace of the UK, well, just the world, because... Anyway, well, I'm going to talk about that now. So, basically, there was this thing that came out as PRISM, which is supposed to be some big surveillance network which logs everything, and, you can basically find out what's going on and all this other stuff. And everybody was in big uproar about it, and as though they never knew anything about it. And I was sort of thinking at the time, how is this suddenly news? I mean, if you actually pay attention, if you actually, I like to think educated, and you know a little bit about the internet, or quite a bit about the internet, or you know about life, and you know about governments, and you know about maybe a bit of conspiracy theory stuff as well, but this has been going on pretty much since 9/11 and before that, in terms of surveillance. And I don't see it's hardly surprising that this is sort of we already knew, people that use the internet and essentially geeks and nerds already knew the US government, specifically the US government, because to be fair, no one else really gives a shit. The US government are surveilling everybody, and that's common knowledge. As far as I could see, everybody should fucking know about that. If you do anything on the internet, especially if it's in the US, it's going to be scrutinised anyway. The fact we didn't necessarily know what it was called didn't really matter. We kind of knew it happened because, let's be honest, the US are so bloody paranoid that someone's going to blow them up because they pissed a lot of people off, that they've got to have this system in place because they think that they're going to get blown up. Which actual fact is mostly a load of bollocks because let's be honest, not very many people have actually tried to blow the US up, really, which is quite surprising. But anyway, let's gloss over the fact that terrorism is a complete and utter lie. But this is real conspiracy theory shit now. But it kind of really pissed me off that the general public didn't really know anything about it. And I was like, and there's this big uproar about it all, as though absolutely nobody knew about it. And I'm just like, why did nobody think that this was happening? Because it's the CIA, because it's the NSA, because it's the US, and the US will do whatever the fuck they want because that's just life. Now, hopefully, with a bit of luck, the EU, because obviously people are idiots and nobody knew about it. Hopefully, then the EU will catch up to it and perhaps then set down something in law that basically says, if you use US service or if you're using services in the US, those US companies have to declare what they're going to give to third parties, including the US government, which actually is what they do anyway. They have to, by law, people like Twitter and Facebook and all these other companies, no matter where they are, they're in the world, so worldwide law and EU law counts quite a bit. Basically, if you give something to a third party, you have to declare that when you sign up to the service or whatever. It doesn't have to specifically say, but you have to. When you ask, you have to be told. And when you actually sign up, it should say something about third parties and stuff like this. And if they find out that actually the Twitter and Facebook and other things like Google Mail and things like Google are in violation of those terms, they'll slap them with a massive fine and a big massive court battle will ensue. So it'll be good because that then means that the EU, if the EU get on board, that's good for internet freedom. That's good for good for us as internet users and pioneers of the internet. Internet users and the community as in general. It will be good. Now, will anything happen? I don't know. I would have thought probably not because it's an interesting. We're moving towards a very interesting kind of area now because I never liked the EU because the EU basically puts loads of draconian laws on countries that are members of it, including the UK, which we pay a lot of money into the EU and we get little in return. But now it's looking as though the EU may be a force for good, which is good. As much as trade agreements will ignore that fact, but. And the fact the euro is in the shit, but that's because, Greece and Italy and all these feckless, useless, jobless, wastes of space of countries don't join the euro, and then, because they don't work, yeah, there you go. That was very, very racist, but it's very, very true. The Italians, the French, the Spanish, the Greeks, they don't work a full day. They work for 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the afternoon, they sleep for the rest of it. Nothing's ever open. So, anyway, I'll leave my stereotypical bigoted views behind on this one, but yeah. So the EU could be a force for good, and that, especially in terms of internet freedoms and stuff like that. And a lot of net neutrality passed not too long ago, as they also overthrew the rule to do with I mean, this is what I don't quite get. I need to look into this because I don't really know why Virgin Media and Sky and a few other people had to ban the Pirate Bay and a few other sites, and the EU then turned around and said, well, actually you don't have to do that anymore. And then they passed something else into law, which is net neutrality, which basically says that ISPs are not responsible for policing anything, and you can't block anything, and sort of like this, that, and the other. Not so many terms; it's a little bit more complicated than that. But and so Virgin Media and Sky don't have to, and I don't really see why they are, because it's not their responsibility. And if the MPAA decide, or the British equivalent bunch of bastards, they are, if they decide to try and say, oh, you've got to ban things, they can just turn around and say no, because you don't have to by law. So it'll be interesting to see how the EU pan out. I mean, I think the Germans might actually be the pioneers for privacy law, because they don't like CCTV and they don't like surveillance, and that could be the push that the EU as a whole needs to push towards internet privacy and things like that, which will be good. As much as the US can do whatever the hell it wants. I mean, if it wants to insist on doing whatever, if the EU start picking up the pace and saying, right, the EU companies have to encrypt shit, you have to make sure you don't pass anything on to the US government, and all these other bits and pieces, it'll make it more difficult for the likes of the NSA to justify spying on millions of people, basically for no real reason other than keeping people in fear. So that's kind of it. I could go into the whole terrorism is a complete and utter lie sort of area of things, and being very conspiracy theorist based, but I'm not going to do that, and I'm probably going to get a load of haters in the comments for like, oh, terrorism is a real threat, and like, unless someone actually gives me proper evidence of such thing, like the fact that, oh, I don't know, we haven't actually been bombed for how many years now? Quite a few years. Either we're insanely good, well, we are, I mean the British are, of course, but or the terrorists are really, really, really bad. I don't believe that the Americans definitely. I mean, you look how really useless their bloody security is. I don't believe that the Americans can be that fucking good. That means they'll stop terrorist attacks. I can't believe that, and I also can't believe the terrorists are that bloody stupid. Well, maybe a little bit. They are that stupid, but I just can't believe that. So, with that in mind, that suggests that terrorism isn't really a real threat. I mean, the UK has already suffered terrorism through the IRA, thanks to the Americans, because they funded most of the IRA. And we've dealt with that, and that was a hell of a lot worse than this supposed terrorism that we currently supposedly have. But it's a non-issue. It's not really anything we need to worry about. And to be honest, I think the terrorists have kind of won. We live in. Well, I don't live in fear because there's nothing to fear. There's not rapists on the streets. There's not murderers at every corner. It's not like that in real life. People generally don't get raped and murdered and mugged and all this other stuff. Yes, it happens, but not as big as people make out, or the Daily Mail will like us to believe. But anyway, so I'm going to do the other thing I need to do is I'm going to have to do an introduction to Android, basically because an IRL friend of mine, RDS999 on Twitter, has just got an Android phone, so he's just joined the Android Master Race, coming from iPhone, and he said, oh, could you do a video on like getting started with Android? I was like, oh, that's quite a good idea, so I'm going to do that later on in the week. I do need to do some server videos, but that'll probably be put on the back burner, because I've got a lot of other bits and pieces to do, not necessarily with YouTube, other things. And I'm just trying to think. IPFire now is running my home network, for those of you that are actually interested. I configured it all probably yesterday. It's all up and running. I just need to configure a few proxy things and need to look at updates, scheduling, and just making sure a few things are tickety-boo, and I might talk to the guys at IPFire and see what's going on with that. But anyway, apart from that, I shall drink my brew, and I shall eat me pizza, and I shall catch you in a later video.